Welcome to The Scoop with Dukes. I'm your host, Phillip Dukes, aka Dukes the Scoop. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram at Dukes the Scoop. And make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Oh, yeah, look in that description and make sure you go subscribe. Subscribe, become a member. You want to support? Be a member. All right, let's dive into it. This week, Shadur Sanders at the combine has been the most talked about subject in the NFL, more so than all of the great combine performances, more so than the free agency moves and the trades that are happening and the requests for trades and uh, people getting cut. Or, I mean, like a lot has happened in the NFL. But when you Google NFL and when you Google what's going on, or when you put in Chat GPT, what are the most popular trending topics when it comes to sports? One of them this week, if not the most, has been Shedeur Sanders at the combine. And what happened was just the backstory on it was there was an anonymous report that came out from a team's quarterback's coach that said, he was turned off by Shedur's arrogance and brash nature. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. But the two words in question for the entire week, the dominant words have been arrogant and brash. Adjectives used to describe probably the best quarterback, or arguably the best quarterback in college football and in the draft this year. All right, so naturally, I went to the combine. I had multiple conversations about Shadur and a lot of other players as well. And I think the consensus is that he's a first round guy, top 10, top 5 pick, depending on who's drafted and where. I think you've seen his body of work, which he isn't shy about letting people know about. But the dominating sentiment of why he's been talked about this week has been these comments that have been released to the public from an anonymous source. Well, guys, what I did was, I did a little digging. I want to find out. All right, when you think about Shadur Sanders, you have to think about his father because his last name is Sanders. For years and years and years, Shadur has been in the public light. You got to think about reality TV shows, being a quarterback, his dad, being, who his father is. There's a lot to think about. So I wanted to do a little digging, and during my digging, I happened to have a conversation with Coach Prime this week, Deion Sanders. So Coach Prime was taking me under his wing as a mentee. And so we talk probably once every 2-3 weeks. And a lot of times it's not about football. This time was no different. This time we talked about life. He gave me some really good advice, unrelated to sports at all. Basically, just about, we're not even going to talk about it. But I also have a job to do. Coach Prime is a huge supporter of what I do. So, and when we talk, he knows that I have to do my job. And so we get to talking. And during our conversation, I bring up what's going on with Shadur. And I'm like, Coach, they hate on Shadur. So I asked Coach Prime straight up. I say, Coach, do the things that have been said about Shadur worry you? He says, nah, dog, God got him. And I'm like, huh? The reason I pause is because anytime we've seen Coach Prime in the past few years have something to say, he was protecting the youth. He was protecting either his kids, his biological kids, or his kids from the Colorado locker room. Those have been the main times that you've seen Coach Prime go public lately. And he's been on record as to say, you can talk about me all you want to, but leave my kids alone. And we've seen Coach Prime defend his kids multiple times. But in this instance, I found it very interesting that Coach Prime hasn't said a whole lot. Hardly anything when it comes to probably the most important time of Shadur's young life. he could have came out now. And let's just keep it a buck. If you don't think Coach Prime knows where that quote came from, I got some beachfront property in College Park, Georgia, to sell you. But he responded, "Guys got him," because Coach Prime knows that, and the reason he knows what I'm about to say is because it happens to him. It happened to him. That there are going to be things that come out about people of a certain ilk in these type of times. And when I say that ilk, when you see people who are confident in themselves, who aren't looking for reassurance because they're already self-assured, and I think that gets taken the wrong way sometimes. Because Pride said, God's got him. Reason being, because God had him. This is from Coach Prime now. I'm not going to share the whole conversation, but this is something I can share. He's not worried about what people are saying about Shedeur because they said these same things about him. He wanted to be the number 1 overall pick when he came out. When you go back and you look at the careers, he arguably should have been the number 1 pick. But he went to the best place for him. He went to where God would have him to go. He went to Atlanta, a city that embraced him, a city that was ready for a superstar like Deion Sanders. So his response to me was not from the Coach Prime, the father. It was from Deion Sanders, the first-round pick, who basically turned the NFL upside down and was able to stand on everything that he said and everything that he promised. So let's dig into why people feel a way about Shedeur and some of the things that have been said. All right, so when you've got a guy, and so I went and watched a lot of people and what they thought about it, and I came across Dan Patrick's show, and he had Peter King, the legend, on. Shout out to Peter King. And Dan Patrick and Peter talked about it, and you go look at this show, you can just YouTube search Dan Patrick Shedeur. It'll come up. Dan Patrick said that there may be a tie to an NFL team's reluctance to draft a guy as confident as Shedeur because of NIL. And that NIL and some teams feel that NIL, name, image, and likeness, has spoiled it. It has spoiled the work ethic of some of the players that are coming in as basically professionals already into the NFL through NIL. And I can see that as a valid point, but I think you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Shadur Sanders was born with an NIL. I saw this in the comments. And somebody said, and I was thinking the same thing. And I'm going to go a little further. Name, image, and likeness. Name, Sanders. Made in the image of Deion Sanders. The likeness of Deion Sanders. But he also, when you think about image, he has his own image. Too legendary. Like, these are things that he's built up. See, NIL usually works for collectives. Well, he didn't have to, even though his valuation was so high as far as being NIL, he didn't get money from the collectives because of his NIL that he brought to Colorado with him. One, he plays quarterback. That's an NIL position in the first place. Like, that's a position where when you talk to people about how do you get NIL money, quarterback is the position that gains the most attention on the field and also the most attention from advertisers. So he's already a great quarterback. He's already been on TV before. He's been on television, nationwide TV, before he even stepped foot on a college football field. Been on TV. A lot of people grew up with Shedeur. So his NIL came with him. He knew who it was. So that's not a worry. But let's dig into the stock that he comes from. I also heard where people were saying, well, of course he'd be arrogant because it's Deion Sanders' son. And a lot of people like to point out that, yeah, he's going to be brash and he's going to say these things because that's Deion's son. Why wouldn't you think that? And they had a negative connotation to it. And they had a negative connotation when they used it in that sense. But this is the part that they're forgetting. He's also Deion Sanders' son. See, we all talk about Deion Sanders when he was high stepping down the sideline with the gold chains and look good, feel good, play good. But go talk to his teammates about how much Deion Sanders studied, about Deion Sanders' preparation, about the things that he did to take care of his body, not smoking, not drinking. Talk to people about how Deion Sanders would make relationships with people who only were special teams players because he took it that serious. He wanted to know everybody on that team who was going to help them win and help the guys who wanted to work as hard as he did. That's the part that you're missing. Deion Sanders coached his kids so hard. Real story. And I've told it a few times. Shout out to Uncle Neely. I told it with Uncle Neely, but I literally saw Deion Sanders get on Shiloh before for not being early enough, not being late, not walking in on time, not 5 minutes here and there. Shiloh was really early, and Deion said, Coach Prime said, need you here earlier, dog. Teaching him a lesson in being early ain't early enough. Same thing with Shedeur. He has ingrained in his boys that being early ain't early enough. In a time where we're worried about NIL shaping somebody's work ethic, you got a guy like Coach Prime telling his children that just being early, and we're not talking about 5 minutes early, we're talking 20, 30 minutes early. Nah, man, what else you got to do? Go take a whole hour and sit in there and study. Even if you already studied, go find something else to do. Become hour early, hour and a half early. This is the same guy that you're saying is the reason for arrogance and being brash and cocky and all of these terms. Is preaching to his children that even though you've been successful at this level, I still want you coming in like you've never had, like you haven't had any success. I think that speaks volumes to the man and what you're getting in the Sanders boys, not just Shedeur, but Shiloh too. Work ethic is going to be there. And we love to forget about the fact that when you get the confidence of a Sanders, you also get the work ethic. Look at Bucky. Shout out to Bucky, man. That's my guy. That's worked with Well Off Media. Bucky could literally not do anything and be set for life, but what he's done is created himself a media company with over 500,000 subscribers that can rival some networks. When you go look at these networks, they don't have 500,000 subscribers, and has turned himself into an entity. But guess what? He's got to be early. He's got to be there. He's not getting to practice and late or whatever. For him to get the footage that he does, he literally has to be in there the same amount of time as coaches. And he's creating himself a lane. Work ethic. Coach Prime ain't gonna hand you nothing. That's what you get when you get a Sanders. All right, dig. We'll go. Let's go to another level. I want to play a clip from Tiger Woods in the 90s. And the word used, the key word I want us to focus on is brash. Let's see. Let's go. Let's get it. Let's dive into the bag right quick.
This is what it looks like. To me, that comes off as a little cocky or brash. Or for 3 more days, I'll be very happy. And a victory would be also nice too.
A victory.
To me, that comes off as a little cocky or brash. Well, when you come out here, you're free. You know what I'm saying? First pro tournament, you say, I can win. I've always figured that why go to a tournament if you're not going there to try and win? As I will explain.
So the interviewer is saying, well, Tiger Woods is saying, he said, look, I want to play well, but I would love to get a victory. And the interviewer is saying, like, don't you think you, for a new golfer coming out saying that you want to win is brash? Don't you think it's brash? And Tiger Woods is saying, listen, I want to win. Why would I come play a tournament that I don't think I could win? But this interviewer is saying, oh, well, that's brash. To Tiger Woods, I just want to put that out there. Because those terms, when you think about a Tiger Woods, when you think about the greats, Peter King told a great story about Dan Marino, about confidence, arrogance, and being and what can be in the perception of these terms. Tiger Woods wasn't thinking about second place. He wanted to win. And the fact that he was so adamant about wanting to win had a guy in his face talking about, don't you think that's brash? The confidence that comes along with greatness for people who may not know how that feels, who may not understand what it takes to be psyched out enough to think that you can win every time you participate in something, is not understood by the masses. And I'm okay with that. The will of Jordan, the will of Kobe, the will of Deion, the will of Tiger, the will of Venus, the will of Serena. When you look at that type of will, there has to be, Tom Brady, you can associate arrogance to all of these people, and they have been. You can go down and look at that list I just gave you, and I guarantee you can find a word attached to them. But when you consider the greatness, that's a small price to pay for somebody feeling like you could have humbled yourself in a way to make them okay, to make them like you, for you to shrink yourself into a smaller cup that they can digest at the expense of the attitude that it takes for you to be great. Well, I don't think that's a fair trade at all. Peter King told a story. I really want y'all to go check this out. Peter King told a story about Dan Marino going crazy for a game. He breaks a record. I don't remember the exact record. And a reporter goes to him after the game with the stat sheet and says, here, look at these stats. They're amazing. And Dan Marino, fresh off a loss, throws the stat sheet away. Now, the gesture of someone going to get this stat sheet and handing it to him and saying, hey, you may want to hold on to this because you broke a record tonight, you had a great game, and Dan Marino throws it away. For people around, or for if that reporter wanted to say, man, can you believe it? The nerve of that guy. I go find this for him. He just tosses my hard work away. But when you want to win, and when you're a great athlete or performer, there are things he didn't care. He wanted to win. So in that moment, that's all he could think about. But so while all week long we've talked about this, I think it's two things that you have to do when you hear these reports coming out. One is consider the source, and I mean both ways. Consider the source that's put Shadur on this platform, which is Coach Prime and his teachings, and also consider the source, right? The anonymous source, right? Consider that source as well. And look at history and the type of people that usually feel a kind of way about those type things. And the second thing you got to do is you got to realize no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody feels like, the tale will be told on the field. So whether you're a fan or not, You're going to get your opportunity to be proven right or wrong, because the football field tells it all. But if I'm a gambling man, that's not a guy I want to bet against. All right, that's my time, folks. Hey, check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Dukes D Scoop. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I appreciate it. Let's go.